Hello, everybody. This is episode 35, 36, Scale Up Podcasts. This is Dan Eisenberg, and I'm really excited to be back with all of you, giving you another unusual experience of an unusual scale-up company. As you know, this scale-up podcast is for companies or hosts companies that are scaling, and partly to give those of you who are still trying to launch something, a concept, a clear idea of what it means to be big, what it means to get big, what are some of the mistakes you can avoid, what are some of the things that you might get right, and just to give you some more examples and role models of what a company looks like that already has some strong indication of product market fit, has real customers. And I'm really excited to be hosting this time Ashish Kapoor of General Robotics. And Ashish, just say hello.
Yeah, well, Dan, a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Okay. And I always start with a question, like, what can you tell us about Ashish Kapoor that I can't easily find out by searching for you? It's not on your LinkedIn profile necessarily, and say nothing about the company General Robotics, because we're going to spend all the rest of the time talking about that. Tell us about yourself as a person.
Yeah, no, I think, my journey to where I am has been through, you know, I would say a lot of changes, geographical changes, lot of changes in terms of what I thought I wanted to do and what I ended up doing. But,
Can you give
so
us an example?
yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in India, right? Grew up in India, spent my first 22 years there. Um, I wanted to become an Air Force pilot as a kid, right? And I optimized all my training for that until I was in high school. And growing up in India, you don't really get exposure to computing. But when I got that exposure to computing, the bits flipped, right? And I imagine, like, I remember a couple of very formative years, which completely changed the trajectory of my life, right? I ended up going to an engineering schools, and then and again another change. Once I came to US, there was no, I never heard about machine learning. It's a computer science programs in India was back in the day, 96 to 2000. I'm dating myself. Was really about theoretical computer science and all those things that you can do really well with pen and paper. I ended up at MIT and everyone's talking machine learning. And I'm like, what the hell is this machine learning? I ended up enrolling in a course and it changed the trajectory of my life again, right?
What year are we talking about roughly?
This is year 2000 when I started my
Okay.
graduate program,
25
right?
years back. Okay.
Yeah, right, 25 years back. And, things were not as evolved as it is now. But what was amazing is that everyone at MIT was associated with machine learning one way or another. And again, it rubs on you. It
Oh,
basically
yeah.
it makes you curious. And I'm very grateful that I landed at that place at that time. And again, completely didn't know about this field as it existed, and it changed the trajectory of my life again.
And
So again,
that's actually fundamental to what we now refer to as AI, but that was
yes,
way before it became public knowledge. Just a quick one though. I read that you are a pilot and you've actually built your own
yeah.
airplane. Is that true, or is that just
Yep, it's a full circle moment. That is true. Once I had, finished my PhD and once I had some disposable income, I ended up becoming a pilot. And then, some of some of the things that you want to do as a kid, it was so fundamental to me growing up as I was thinking, I was carving my journey through all the learnings. I ended up coming back to it and I did it on my own terms. I think in the long term of things, it's better now because I do it for education, I do it for fun, I do it for the experience of it. It's not a job, and it's something that's very close to my heart. So yes, I did end up coming back to it, and I did end up building a kit airplane that I fly around the US.
Or you still do? Okay. And I don't know if you flew out to Washington, but you certainly landed at Washington. Tell us just a little bit about Microsoft, and then we'll get into General Robotics.
Yeah, yeah. So after my PhD, it was very clear that I wanted to keep learning and doing research. And back in those days, 2005, 2006, Microsoft Research was the most elite lab on the planet. Right? This is where every single mind that I interacted with would want to come and work and get exposure to. So I had that opportunity, and I ended up spending, some of the most important years of my career at Microsoft Research. I, worked, of course, in machine learning and robotics, but also had great exposure with, some of the world's foremost experts into, say, quantum machine learning, for instance. Some of the work that I did there was very exciting. But most importantly, the the muscle I built there was how to take frontier and foundational ideas and push them through incubation phase to commercialization phase, and in the end build large enterprise businesses, right? So, doing research not for the just sake of doing research, but to really understand and create value that would, be a positive addition to our society.
Mhm. And I assume monetizable because Microsoft is.
Of course, I'm
Yeah.
monetizable. I mean, if you create value, you can monetize it, but it has to create real value.
Mhm. So just before we get into General Robotics, can you just give us an example of the kind of activity or idea that you would that maybe you were involved in personally that creates real value both for society, for economies, etc. What give us a for instance?
Yeah. So again, keeping robotics into focus, right? We have known for several decades now that a number of tasks, if automated, can be helpful. They can be helpful because it leads to safety. It leads to efficiency, right? Um, Imagine someone doing a repetitive tasks all their lives. Of course they're adding value, but if it's something that's repeated, you know, it's slavery, it's drudgery. And if you can actually have a, a robot or a machine automate for you, I do believe that that's a lot of value. So again, value you can think in terms of monetary values, but value is also efficiency. Value is also providing, folks relief from this drudgery, from this slavery, right? So when I think about robotics, I do believe that there is a lot of value that they can add to the society. And again, with some of the impending labor shortages that we are seeing, there's plenty of discourse around it already. But I think it goes way deeper than that. If there is a task that's repetitive, that's so predictable, I'd rather have machines do it.
Mhm. Well, so this sounds like you're laying the groundwork, at least the moral and ethical groundwork for General Robotics. So let's fast forward a little bit. And what's the underlying idea of General Robotics? Remember, you're talking to a 50% technical, 50% lay audience.
Yeah, yeah. No, robotics is a fascinating field layered with so many different technologies, right? When we think about a robot, we think about machines, we think about motors, we think about the electrical system, and now, we are also thinking about AI. So, until I would say, now, most of your robots are teleoperated. And again, it's a little bit of an extreme description, but they are fancy toys. They have machines, they have sensors, but you still need a lot of human involvement in order to make them work, right? They are fancy collection of parts, half a million, $1 million worth of collection of parts, but you do need someone to operate it in most of the cases. And sure, we have examples now that are coming out to be more autonomous and automated. The biggest, issue with that, I would say, that phase of robotics is that it's not scalable at all. You need one person per robot to operate it. And of course, you are seeing efficiencies. You might be seeing efficiency in terms of lifting, say, heavy objects or doing things a little bit faster. But still, your scale is tied 1:1 with the presence of a human operator. And and I do believe that is not path towards scale. It's limited, and that's why we see so many pilots, but very few deployments, because the value is still tied to a presence of human.
So how did you crack that? Because it's what you're describing. It's not really a linear incremental change. It's really a fundamental. To change that's really fundamental in the way we think about robots, right? So
Yeah. So
tell,
again,
tell us.
So again, here is where we should think about the task at hand. There are certain tasks at hand where things are very predictable. Nothing changes, and it's the repeat motion. So you can solve with what I call an open loop controller or a planner. And this is what the state of the industrial robotics is. So when you go and see all these manufacturing facilities, they try to minimize uncertainty altogether, right? It's pretty much an assembly line, and that one thing can be repeated on and on. And again, it gives you certain efficiencies for sure. But again, anything that you need to scale up, like anything that you need to change, require a lot of effort. So I'll give you an example for car manufacturer. If they have the same kind of car that needs to be built on and on, you can likely program the robots and they'll operate for a few years. But now you have a new model, you have new components, you have different design. So right now the only choice is you start from scratch, right? And I think there is a lot of value to be created between those two extremes.
Okay, and so what is General Robotics?
So General Robotics basically tries to bridge that gap with AI, that adaptation, that ability to deal with non-structured, semi-structured, right, environments, because the parts might change. They might show up in different configuration. There might be lightning changes. I mean, all of those dynamics that happens in real world, you need the robot to step up to it.
And
So what General Robotics does then is give this ability, this adaptation, this AI capability to these machines who are already out there, right? And this is essentially what we call intelligence grid. It makes your robot way more powerful because it can deal with these uncertain and semi-structured environments.
I understand there's this concept of fundamental to this breakthrough, let's say, is a concept of a grid. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Let me take you back to the days of electricity, right? And we have all DC versus AC, all of those kinds of things. But the reality is that if you go to a supermarket, you go and buy a toaster, an oven, an electrical appliance, that thing is a fairly fancy machine, but unless you plug it into a power grid, you can't do much. Maybe some of them are battery operated, but that's about it, right? But you do need this notion of a power grid which permeates this energy throughout the planet, and things becomes very easy. Same thing with robots. These robots right now are fancy appliances. You can go and buy these $500,000 robots, but you cannot make them do things really easily unless you are on General Robotics grid. So grid is this idea that permeates intelligence through every bit and atom on this planet.
So you're not talking about electricity here. You're talking about
AI. I'm talking about basically the ability for these robots to tap into the skills they need, the information, the know-how that all of us have created over the last 50 years, so that they can get to deployment faster, right? So off-the-shelf robots, very likely, we have 40 plus robot OEMs on grid, and you go and buy that robot. if it's on grid, it can, it can do things which otherwise will take you years to build.
Even for instance.
So, two skills I talk about it is, you know, ability to manipulate objects and ability to move in cluttered environments. Right? That's what, if you think humanoid does, moves and it picks and places things. Those two skills, if you have it, you pretty much covers 99.9% of the surface area here. Right? So those are a couple of examples. So basically, we do have first party, skills, which we call grid arms and grid nav, and which is ability to move in space and ability to pick and place objects. And then if you have off-the-shelf robots, you can plug it into grid and use them.
So I'm trying to think of a metaphor, but basically you're not changing the robots at all, or if so, very little. You're really changing what they connect to. So they're getting their intelligence from this big thing that's out there. That's what you've created.
Exactly. Like everyone, wants to build brains for the robots. And I would say brain is actually a wrong analogy. You need intelligence grid. This intelligence grid is the source of these skills, these capabilities that these machines need right now in order to be deployable, in order to be useful, right? And that's what it is.
So does this mean if I'm using robots today and I'm not using them very well, and I sign up for your service, let's call it that, we'll get into the business model in a second, then it basically almost immediately, my robot has gone from kind of stupid to really smart and adaptive.
Yep. So, usually when you work with customers, if they already have one of the robots that's on grid, we can show up and we can make that robot do something useful. And again, I'm saying make something useful. Useful has different connotations, but in usually in minutes, like within the first day, usually their robot is doing things. And we do it because those robots are already modeled. They already have these kinds of capabilities.
So how many customers? Let's back up just a little bit. Tell us the story of but I want to get into some of the specifics of this and how you sell and so on. But now, can you give us the story of General Robotics today, just by the numbers?
Yeah. So just by the numbers. So you mean like in terms of the kind of businesses we are doing and things like those?
Numbers of installations, numbers of licenses, how much money you're making, how much money you've raised, whatever, how many people you have, whatever it is, give us some idea.
Yeah. So again, let me just start with the history of General Robotics, and we can, as we go through it, we can share the numbers. So General Robotics started in 2023. Until that time, I was leading Microsoft Research robotics initiative that I had, helped co-found in 2014 at that time. We are a 25 people company, and out of 25, 19 are some of the top roboticists in the world. So we are a very technology first company, right? Why? Robot AI is a frontier technology. So you need best minds. So what we call a research and deployment company. We are building some of these capabilities, and more importantly, we are bridging, the last mile towards deployment. There are a lot of companies that are still working on the foundational technologies, but what we have realized is that the biggest gap is getting to deployment. So you mentioned numbers. I have spoken with over 150 large enterprises. These are enterprises in manufacturing, in defense, in logistics. They need robots now. Often they have spent north of $100 million just acquiring equipment. These are large robots, in the hope of that a number of their workloads will be automated. Out of those 150 large enterprises, 0 were in deployment, in production, right? And which is a very, which is a very surprising number given the amount of investment that these large enterprises have gone into. And again, looking under the hood, like what's the biggest issue? The biggest issue is that access to technology, both access as well as access to expertise. For every 20 machine learning engineers out there, I think it's less than one who can go and build AI technologies that would be deployable on robots. There are probably few hundred people worldwide that can work at the intersection of deep machine learning and robots, and everyone is competing for them, right? So if you're a large enterprise, how do you go and solve these problems for you, right? So you need both access to technology and expertise. One case study that we looked into, large enterprise, again, it's one of those multi-billion dollar conglomerates. I can't mention the name on the podcast, but they had spent 18 months. They built a small robotics team.
Was this
Right.
a manufacturer
It's a
or?
manufacturer. It's a manufacturer, right? They seemingly had the robotics teams, but when these large enterprises, when they go and build robotics teams, I mean, these are experts in robotics, but from mechanical engineering perspective, from mechatronics perspective. The thing that's going to unlock the scale is machine learning AI in the context of robotics. And unfortunately, there's not enough expertise out there, and especially with an experience towards deployment. So we saw that patterns on and all. So again, in terms of our customer base, we have a handful of large enterprises. We really started selling this product only in last fall. So until then, we do have signed customers. Approximately 10-ish is the number. I have to go back and check what the exact number is, but
They're big. These are big enterprises.
these are large enterprises. These are large enterprises. And that's where I see the opportunity right now.
Is there any one of them that says, "Hey, you know what? This doesn't make any sense"? It sounds to me like everyone you go to would say, "Oh my God, this just show me that it works," and it could be a game changer.
Yeah, exactly. It's the needs based, right? The thing is, all of these enterprises needs to solve it. There's no question about it, right? And the friction is large, right? So imagine, like, if you're a large enterprise, you have spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and these are not producing value. Who do you go to? Do you go to another manufacturer to buy another robot? No. Do you go to a model building company? They can give you model, but still the deployment is not solved. Do you go to an SI? Do you create your own teams? I mean, this is a problem that needs to be solved, and there are not many people out there who can solve it.
So, who are the kinds of functionaries that you're actually selling to? Are these the VPs of operations, manufacturing, logistics? Who's the customer you talk to,
Yeah.
and who's doing the selling from your perspective, from your side?
Yeah. Yeah, we idle then the ideal conversation with us is with the operations team, because we want to get to deployment ASAP. Otherwise, it's a research project. It stays R&D, and the next cycle where they don't have budgets, you get cycled out. You need to get to value ASAP, and that's the mantra that we operate on. So it's operations teams.
And how long does it take you to get there? First meeting to showing them that it works to
Yeah.
saying, okay, give us a proposal.
Yeah. So again, these are large enterprise deals, and you need to have what I say, the experience and muscle to really understand the anatomy of these deals. That's one thing that we got trained at Microsoft, right? Microsoft always focused very heavily on large enterprise deals, so we have that muscle. From first contacts, like the initial first customer that we got, it took time. It took close to 4 months, but we have developed good muscle. Some of the enterprise customers we have closed in a week,
That's
right?
crazy.
And
That's crazy. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah, it's I mean, enterprise is a different beast altogether. It's not like consumer, it's not like SaaS. It's a relationship based, and you need to really put yourself in the shoes of your customer, because they are trying to create large value with you, right? But it's really understanding the process. It's really understanding the anatomy of a deal. So it's one thing, right? Like, we are technology first as well, right? We are 19 roboticists, but I do have those superstars who basically can build enterprise businesses.
So in a week to actually get a request for proposal or a proposal out there is nothing in for those companies, I'm
Yeah,
sure. It's
I don't believe we have done anything through an RFI. We directly talk to the stakeholders in the
so
companies.
so do you consider yourself the top salesperson in the company?
Well,
Are you doing the
I,
selling? Let's put it
I
this way.
I have to do the selling for sure. I have to do the selling for sure, right? But more important than that is putting in a scalable process. So here is the deal. Most of the robotics companies, they can sell maybe one or two large deals. And there are plenty got pulled out under their feet because those
Wait,
deals fell.
sorry. I lost you. So let's go
Oh,
back with the space. Let's go back. There are plenty of large.
okay. So they are,
Wait. Let me put a space. Let me put a silence in there.
yeah, okay. All right. So, while sales is a top, priority for me, more important is actually ability to have multiple of those sales and in a repeatable manner. Robotics, this has been a challenge from day one. Why? Because every robotics, opportunity is unique, and we have to start finding patterns so that we can scale up. So a lot of my personal time and energy is ensuring that we have a repeatable and and an efficient process.
How
Of
do you
course,
do
the
that?
first couple of deals I had to do it, but then we do have some senior leaders who understand that template,
So
right?
is this kind of a natural transition from you being the let's say evangelical salesperson whose evangelism is showing that it not preaching it, but showing that it actually works and using your understanding of the organizations, the pain points, and of course what you do,
Right.
and then transitioning that to other people who are like you? Or do you see yourself building a sales team that's dedicated to sales?
So, our focus is large enterprise. So large enterprise, I want to go and capture 100 large enterprise customers in the next 12 to 18 months. So it's not a large sales team, but more domain experts who have been, in those areas, who have those relationships, right? And they have to go and, you know, so it's not like, you have an army of sales team and they're going, but these are very specialized folks who have experience in the industry, right?
When you say
And
domain, you mean somebody who understands logistics, robotic
manufacturing,
logistics, and manufacturing,
exactly. They are
defense,
domain
etc.
experts. They are domain experts.
What about
And
China? What about China? We have to talk a little bit about that because from what I've understood, they're
yeah,
incredibly advanced in deploying robots. Do you see them as a potential market, or is it just too opaque?
I mean, when you think about like China as a market versus oh, okay. Yeah. So there are two questions like China as a potential market and China as a potential provider of technology. Like those are two different questions, right? I mean, right now we do not sell actively in China. I mean, there are plenty of opportunities within US and in Europe and Singapore, for instance. We do go and work with industries over there. But I think more interesting is the question of the technology that's coming out from China, specifically the hardware. Right. The biggest friction to deployment, actually, in my opinion, is going to be availability of hardware. We have plenty of OEMs that can, you know, I would say provide robots, but how many of these robots you can deploy 24/7 without any breakdown for months? And to be honest, from where I am seeing things, there are very few OEMs in the world that have that capability, right? So if that's the bottleneck, And if there is a strong player who can provide those kinds of reliability and guarantees, I do believe we need to at least look at them, right? And right now in the industrial world, there are very few OEMs who can provide that kind of performance.
Are they more Chinese companies?
No, I think most of them are actually Western Hemisphere right now. I mean, they
Mhm.
are producing, you know, that kind of scaled, installation that's, with all the support behind it, right? I think, again, this is a number that I've seen float around, and it might, again, I haven't done personally research behind it, but I think the worldwide install base of industrial robots is single digit millions right now. It's not much, right? And why is that the case? The case is, I think, the reliability. And do I expect that thing to double next year or two? I do not think so, right? So there's a lot of experiments and a lot of interesting technology coming out, but the ones that will make the difference are the ones that can provide this kind of reliability. And that's an open question to me.
Got it. I want to talk about two more things and then sort of bring
Yeah.
things to a close because I've promised you and also the listeners that this is relatively a short
Yeah.
podcast. But one of them has to do with raising money. And I assume that you've raised venture capital. Say a little bit about that and who are the best venture capitalists for you, the ones that you selected and they selected you, and the ones that sort of might not have fit very well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first check into the company was E14, and E14 is the MIT, venture fund. And why I'm an MIT alum, the first thing when you start a business is you should go and mine your network. And I got overwhelming, endorsement for E14, and pretty much, um, and it's been a pleasure. Why? It took me back to my roots. It untapped some of these conversations that I would never have had with alumni, with fellow researchers, colleagues, and so forth.
So
So when I
E14, A, they spoke your language, and B, they sort of connected you to people who spoke your language.
exactly, it was almost like an homecoming. It's like, oh, okay, it felt like these guys are really behind us. And since day one, I think it's been a pleasure to work with. So that has completely colored my perspective on venture capital, right? You can think of VCs as a source of capital, and a lot of folks would look at it. But in the end, right, they are partners in your company. And I always ask the question, what do they bring besides the capital? Because, in this day and age where there's so much capital in robotics, what is scarce is the ability for these, VC firms to help you in a meaningful way beyond capital.
Can you give a couple of concrete examples? By the way, disclosure, I'm an LP in E14. That's how I got connected with you, Ashish, as you know. But so give just a couple of instances of how E14 has been particularly helpful.
Yeah, definitely. They have facilitated many conversations with customers.
Okay.
They have so I think that's number one. Robotics is again as a frontier technology, so you know access to customers for large enterprise, you need to unblock those channels, and VCs are great for that because they do speak with large enterprises one way or another, right? So that has been very important one. The second thing is actually access to talent, right? I mean, again, because they are at MIT, right? Most of the folks working in robotics talk to us, and we have had the opportunity to speak with many of these candidates ourselves, right? And again, I am a technologist, right? I spent time in the industry. No matter what stage of career stage you are, when you jump into like building your own company or startup, there is a learning curve, and you need folks who can help you learn fast, right? And again, this MIT ecosystem has been great.
So, what are some of the key learnings, sort of inflections that you've gone through in the last few years? And by the way, you said a long time ago, 2023 is like, poof, that's yesterday.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
you've
yeah.
come out really, I mean, in 3 years, General Robotics has done an awful lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey. So few things that I have learned is, again, access to capital is easy, but access to folks that can really help you is very hard. And you need to optimize for the second, and then the capital will come automatically, right? So that's first thing. The second thing is, when I am hiring, right? It's very easy to screen for competence in terms of technology, in terms of the skills, right? But what counts most in the early days of startup is beyond those skills, And again, I think
Like what?
it's so. Again, this is something I picked up from Mark Andreessen, actually, and then he talks about three characteristics. One is curiosity, integrity, and drive. We are an R&D company. I need people who are curious, who would experience and experiment with things. You need to have drive, because things are happening so fast and so much that if you are not, willing to experiment and be excited with it, again, startup is the wrong place to be. And of course, integrity. One of the things that's great realization is how much of the business ecosystem anywhere in the world is shared understanding. It's understanding of that, all right, you would do the right thing when it takes. And of course, everything has to be codified, but those are the three things that are so important, and it's very difficult to screen for them. So if I find someone who excels in these three axes, I would go and hire them right away. I think skills cannot be taught if you have sufficient intelligence and sufficient, I guess, ability to function. But those three things, those are hard to find.
One of the things I enjoy about this conversation is that you've succeeded in taking this very complex world and in a way boiling it down to the essence of these are the skill, or these are the qualities that you need, and these are the issues that you have to solve for your customers. And here's how we get the capital. It's not the money, it's the money plus. And the
Yeah,
plus is more important than the money, maybe.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
by the way, we call this in our work, we call it the 3C model: customers, capacity, cash.
yeah,
If you optimize on those, solve for those 3Cs, you're pretty far along the
yeah,
journey.
yeah,
Let me end with one, because I appreciate the time you're taking, but it's not unlimited. I appreciate that. And just, if you were meeting your self at the age of 20, given what you know today, and your younger self has the ambition or the drive to do something, like build a company, what are the two or three things that you would tell her or him?
yeah, yeah. Um, the first thing, take more bold risks. I came from a very conservative family, right, where risk taking was discouraged. And one thing that I would have changed is that it's easier to take risks when you are younger, right? So, take material risks that have the potential to, make a huge positive impact, right? Don't shy away from that. So I think that's probably the most important thing. And the second thing is, it's all about your network. It's who you know, who you can call when you need help, who you can help, right? When you're building a business, you can't do everything yourself. You will have to rely on people. And again, build a network, not like how we think about network building in an event. No, I mean, these are relationships that gets curated over years. Some of the most successful technological executives, both in big tech as well as startups I've seen, they have a crew of people. When they move from one place to another, they take that crew with them, right? And they shared their growth together. They built these things together. And that's, something that you should start at least thinking about it from early days in your career.
I hear what you're saying. I would use the word trust, even though that's oftentimes misunderstood and
Yeah.
misused. But I think combining integrity and network, if you can build trust, meaning many different things, the you can do things faster and with less friction.
Correct. Correct.
By the way, I have to just take a minor issue as a 74-year-old with the comment about when you're younger, you can be bolder, take more risks. I think you also have less to lose when you're my age. The difference is you
Yeah.
don't have time to recover from your mistakes.
From your mistake. That's true. That's true. No, I mean, a lot of decisions I optimized in my life was towards safety earlier on. And, that's one thing that I would definitely, rethink.
Okay. Well, we're going to bring this to an end for now. I hope that in a couple of years we can meet again and maybe talk to you and maybe some of your colleagues, and hopefully we'll see another digit or two around the revenues as you ramp up. I expect extraordinarily rapidly and become an amazing success story. But Ashish Kapoor, founder of General Robotics, thank you very much for being on Scale Up Podcast with us.
Yep. Thank you, Dan. A pleasure to be
So,
here.
so this is Dan Eisenberg signing off. Thank you all listeners for being with us. This is episode, I think it's 36, to be honest. I don't remember 35 or 36. And thank you for being on this journey. This is a serious hobby for me. So the way you can pay me back, so to speak, is just share this, download it, share it, tell people about it. I think if you look at all the episodes have had together, this is a unique panorama of people who and situations in which companies are actually growing and providing a lot of value. And I think I like what Ashish said about the different kinds of value. And I think that's true in every case. We see all these companies providing more than just monetary value, but also social value as well. So again, Ashish, thank you very much. We wish you all the best. And we're signing off here.
Okay. Bye. Thanks.
That is it.
All right. Thank you. That's great. I
How do you
look
feel?
forward to the episode.
Any comments?